Freezing cold water rushed into my mouth and nose, my lungs burning as if twisted by knives. I saw Liam standing by the pool, impeccably dressed in his suit, his expression as indifferent as if he were watching a drowning cat. And my best friend, Mia, was crouched by the edge, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed heart-wrenchingly. "What are you crying for? You're the one who pushed me." That was my last thought before consciousness slipped away. Then, I snapped my eyes open. The chandelier on the ceiling stung my eyes with its brightness. I gasped for air, my fingers clenching the sheets beneath me, dry, soft sheets that smelled of laundry detergent. A bead of sweat slid down my forehead. Not pool water. Cold sweat. The phone vibrated on the pillow. I picked it up mechanically, and the date on the screen hit me like a dull thud in the chest, September 1st, 2019. The day before senior year started. I froze for 3 seconds. Then I turned over and sat up, my bare feet touching the floor. The cold floor jolted me fully awake. I walked to the desk and pulled open the drawer. At the very bottom lay a photo. In it, Mia and I wore the same school uniform, our eyes curved into crescents as we smiled. On the back was a line of handwriting, "Chloe and Mia, best friends forever." I stared at those words. I remembered when she was 7, and I fell into the river, she jumped in and grabbed my collar. I remembered when she was 12, and my parents were fighting, she sat with me in the stairwell and cried all night. I also remembered what came later. The things that hadn't happened yet, but that I remembered all too clearly. I turned the photo over, my nail scraping hard across the word forever. My phone buzzed again. A WeChat message from Liam. "Chloe, school starts tomorrow. I'll wait for you at the school gate." I stared at the message. Before, seeing this would have made my heart race. But now, it only made me feel sick. I typed out a line, "Don't bother waiting." Send. Delete contact. Block. 3 actions, 1 smooth motion. I lifted my head. The person in the mirror was 17, eyes swollen, lips pale. But the gaze was different. The Chloe from before had fear and eagerness to please in her eyes. The Chloe now had only one thing in her eyes, a blade. The night had not yet faded beyond the window. I pulled open the curtain and spoke a single sentence toward the pitch-black skyline. My voice was soft, but every word pierced the air like a nail. "This time, it's my turn to choose." The first day of school. I changed into my uniform and stood at the entrance. On the shoe cabinet was a carton of milk, still warm. Mom had heated it up early in the morning. In the past, I would have found her nagging unbearable, slamming the door without even a goodbye. Only later did I realize that mornings like this aren't so plentiful after all. I picked up the milk and put it in the side pocket of my backpack. "Mom, I'm leaving." A face peeked out from the kitchen, surprised. "Take care on the road." I had already opened the door, but suddenly turned back. The milk was really good. I left right after saying that, not daring to look back at Mom's expression. Because I knew, if I turned around, I would cry. The school gate was still the same. I stood at the entrance, watching the students come and go. "Chloe." A familiar voice came from behind me. My back instantly tensed up. Mia jogged over, her ponytail swinging back and forth, holding 2 cups of milk tea in her hands. "I brought your favorite, taro bubble tea." I stared at that cup of milk tea. Memories surged up. Not vague dreams. They were clear, carrying a taste, memories etched into my bones. The sharp cramp in her lower abdomen after finishing the milk tea. The slight upward curl of her lips as she stood on the podium accepting the award for first in the class. And that casual remark, "Oh, did you eat something bad?" "Thanks." I took the milk tea but didn't drink it. Instead, I unscrewed the lid and glanced inside. A layer of white powder clung to the cup's wall, not evenly mixed. I looked up at Mia. Her eyes flickered. Just for a split second. I screwed the lid back on and placed the milk tea back in her hand. Not in the mood for taro today. Mia's smile froze for a moment. Then I'll get you something else? No need. Mia bit her lip. That hesitant look I once found considerate now struck me as deliberate. Chloe, are you in a bad mood? Is it because of Liam? I looked at her. When she mentioned Liam, there was a flicker of light in her eyes. I knew that look all too well. There's nothing between Liam and me, I said. If you like him, don't hold back on my account. Mia froze for a moment, then quickly shook her head. What are you talking about? How could I possibly? I told you, I cut her off, don't worry about me. I picked up my bag and walked into the school building without looking back. A voice came from behind me. Chloe. I turned around. A boy was standing at the corner of the stairs. His school uniform was loose and sloppy, with 2 buttons undone at the collar, and an unlit cigarette was pinched between his fingers. Noah. I knew that face. From those memories. On the hospital corridor, he sat in a wheelchair, a blanket over his legs, a stack of papers in his hands. He said to me, I'll see your father's case through to the end. I didn't know him back then. I refused. He never showed up again afterward. The look on your face just now, Noah tucked the unlit cigarette behind his ear, doesn't quite suit a high school student just starting the new term. My fingers curled slightly. You're a high school student too, I said. What expression do you think a high school student should have? Noah looked at me for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled. It was a brief smile, gone in a flash. I've seen you in the library, he said. Last month, you were reading Criminal Law all by yourself. I had indeed read that book. On many late nights, I'd read it over and over again. What's it to you? I asked. Noah shrugged and walked past me. As he brushed by, I caught a faint medicinal smell on him. Also, there was a deep old scar on the tiger's mouth of his right hand. The shape of that scar was a bit strange. As if it had been pressed hard against something for a long time. After the first class ended, I went to the library. Not out of luck. But because I remembered. In those memories, I had accidentally discovered a piece of paper among these bookshelves. That piece of paper changed everything. It was just too late by then. 7th row, left-hand side. Urban Building Safety Manual. I pulled it out and flipped to page 137. Tucked inside the fold, there was indeed a folded piece of paper. There were only 3 lines on the letter. The foundation materials of Building A have been replaced, and the inspection report has been falsified. Signed, Robert. If you do not cooperate, you will bear the consequences. Robert. My father's name. I stared at those lines, sweat seeping from my palms. I had obtained this knife 2 years earlier than last time. I folded the letter and tucked it into the inner pocket of my school uniform. The paper pressed against my chest, faintly warm. During the second period in the afternoon, the homeroom teacher walked into the classroom. Class, next month there will be a selection exam for direct admission quotas. The top 10 in the city can be directly admitted to key universities. I opened my notebook and wrote 4 words on the first line, early admission exam. Memory surged up. Review materials soaked and ruined by water. The set of notes Liam handed me. The unfamiliar questions in the exam hall. And that score report, 2 places short. Back then, sitting in the exam room, I thought, if only I had tried a little harder. Now I know, it wasn't that I didn't work hard enough. Someone was holding me back, tugging at my sleeve from behind. I capped my pen. This time, those hands won't catch me. When the dismissal bell rang, I was the last one out of the classroom. At the end of the hallway, Mia was standing with Liam. The 2 of them were close together. Mia said something, laughing. Liam looked down at her with a tender expression. I've seen that look before. It was the same look he had when he asked me to be his guarantor. And the same look he wore on the phone when he said, "Chloe, help me one more time." I walked past them without looking back. "Chloe!" Mia called out behind me. I quickened my pace. A black car was parked at the school gate. The window rolled down, revealing the face of a middle-aged man. Well-groomed, hair meticulously combed, a Patek Philippe on his wrist. Victor. Liam's father. "Chloe, I heard Liam is pursuing you," he said with a smile. "This son of mine, he just doesn't know any better. If he bullies you, just let me know." I lowered my eyes. In my memory, this smiling face had appeared many times. After my father's accident, he patted my shoulder and said, "My condolences." When I was being hounded by debt collectors, he sighed and said, "This kid Liam is too immature." By the swimming pool, he stood in the distance, expressionless, staring at the water's surface. "Uncle Victor," I looked up, meeting his eyes calmly. "I heard that Goo's Real Estate is currently bidding on that plot of land east of the city." Victor's smile faltered for a moment. "The foundation standards for that piece of land," I said, "seem to have a bit of a problem." I left right after I said it. I didn't turn back to look at Victor's expression. But I could feel that gaze, clinging to my back like a snake. When I got home, I didn't go into my own room. Instead, I knocked on the door next door. The door opened a crack. Emma. My neighbor, 2 years older than me, studying law at the best university in the city. I remember her. In those memories, she once came to me. Red-eyed, she said she could help me investigate. I refused. Because Liam said, "What can a student like her do?" Later, I saw her in the news. She was threatened, her car was vandalized, and her advisor urged her to give up. She didn't give up. But all her efforts amounted to nothing but a cold, heartless verdict. Those who should have gone to prison were only fined. "Emma," I handed her the letter, "can you take a look at this for me?" Emma took the letter and read it 3 times. When she looked up, her expression had changed. "Who gave this to you?" "Found it in my dad's old work notes." That wasn't a lie. The paper was indeed related to my father's old belongings. I just found it ahead of time. Emma was silent for a long time. "Chloe, do you know what this thing means?" I nodded. Someone tampered with the inspection reports and used substandard building materials. My father's signature was forged. The people behind it are still out there. Emma stared at me for 5 seconds. "What do you plan to do?" I said something I had never dared to say before. "I want to study law." Emma was stunned. I continued, "For the recommendation exam, I'm going to rank in the top 10 in the city and get into Jingda Law School." "And then?" Emma's voice was a little hoarse. "And then," I said, "I'll make sure the people who belong in prison end up there." Emma didn't say, "What can a high school student do?" She just turned the letter over and read it twice more. "Handwriting analysis requires the original document." "I'll find it." Emma glanced at me and handed the letter back. "Come find me once you do," she said. "I know a teacher who specializes in forensic analysis." 11 p.m. I finished my shower and sat down at my desk. I opened a new notebook and wrote a single word on the cover, "Ledger." Then I began to write. Not a list of hatred. But one entry after another. October 2019, the recommendation exam. March 2020, the loan guarantee. December 2020, my father's incident. August 2021, the construction accident. June 2022, the swimming pool. When I wrote that line, my hand trembled. Those images surged back. The color of the water. The sting in my lungs. And the 2 faces on the shore. One indifferent. One in tears. I put down the pen, took 3 deep breaths, then picked it up again. After writing the final stroke, I closed the notebook. I walked to the window and pulled open the curtains. A few lights were on in the building across the way. One of them was Noah's. I turned off the light and lay back down in bed. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and closed my eyes. Tears slid from the corners of my eyes into the pillow. Not because I was afraid. It was because those images were too vivid. So vivid that I dared not close my eyes. But I had to close them, because tomorrow had to go on. 3 days later. The last day to register for the early admission exam. I walked into the homeroom teacher's office. "Teacher, I want to apply for the law department at Jing University." The homeroom teacher adjusted his glasses. "Chloe, you ranked 47th in the city on the last mock exam, and the law department at Jingda University only admits one student." "I know." "Are you sure?" I pulled a stack of papers from my backpack. It was something I had spent 3 nights writing, a research outline on commercial fraud and construction engineering safety. I had learned the format from academic journals in the library. The legal provisions I cited were copied down after standing in a bookstore for 4 hours. I didn't remember the exact article numbers. But I remembered what they meant. The homeroom teacher flipped through 5 pages, and when he looked up, his expression shifted from doubt to surprise. "Did you write this?" "Yes." "Chloe," the homeroom teacher put down the stack of papers and looked at me seriously. "If you can maintain this level, you have a chance at early admission. But you need to understand, this path won't be easy." "I know." Walking out of the office, I ran into Mia in the hallway of the teaching building. She was holding a file folder in her hand, and when she saw me, she instinctively hid it behind her back. "Chloe, what did you go see the teacher for?" I looked at her face. I remembered when she was 7, jumping into the river and grabbing me by the collar. I remembered when she was 12, sitting with me in the stairwell as we cried. And I also remembered later, standing by the swimming pool, crying louder than anyone else. "Mia," I called her name, my tone calm. "The file folder behind you, it contains my early admission application modification form, doesn't it?" Mia's face instantly changed. "How do you know?" I didn't. "You have a habit when you write," I said. "When you write the character Sue, the left falling stroke in the Lee part is especially long. Last time you helped me fill out a form, I noticed." That was true. When she filled out that form, I even teased her about it. "Give me the file." Mia held it tightly. Footsteps echoed from the end of the hallway. Noah emerged from the corner. He glanced at Mia, then at me. "Student," he said to Mia, "the surveillance camera in the academic affairs office is pointed right at the archive room door." Mia's face went completely pale. She let go, and the file fell to the floor. Mia ran. Papers scattered everywhere. I crouched down and picked them up one by one. Noah stood nearby, not helping. "How do you know she's changing your preferences?" he asked. I stood up and brushed the dust off my school uniform. "Because it's not the first time." Mia had altered my homework record before, changing an A to a B+. At the time, I thought it was an accident. Noah looked at me without saying a word. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He was silent for 2 seconds. "Because you remind me of someone." "Who?" "Someone I never got the chance to know." He turned and walked away. I stood there, watching his retreating figure. A week later. I came home from school and found my mother sitting in the living room, crying. On the coffee table lay a hospital diagnosis report. Memories flooded back. In those visions, this diagnosis report had appeared. I hadn't paid it any mind at the time. Later, when her condition worsened, the doctor said, if only we had intervened sooner. "Mom, let me see the diagnosis report." Mom shook her head. "It's nothing serious, just..." I had already taken the paper from her. Thyroid nodule. Benign. But I knew that benign doesn't mean it will stay benign forever. "Mom, I'll go with you to the hospital for a follow-up tomorrow." Mom lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed. "Didn't you say you were going out with your classmates this weekend?" I shook my head. I'm not going anywhere. I stood up, walked behind Mom, and wrapped my arms around her from behind. Mom, from now on, your matters will always come first. Mom's body stiffened for a moment, then began to tremble. That evening, I found something in my mother's bedside drawer. A silver necklace. The pendant was a star, its surface already tarnished and blackened. It was the only piece of jewelry my mother had when she got married. Later, when times were tough, my mother put the necklace away and never wore it again. In those memories, I only saw it for the first time while sorting through her belongings after she passed. By then, it had turned completely black. I picked up the necklace and held it up to the light. The chain was broken in one spot. I found a red string, tied the broken part together, and then put it around my own neck. The pendant rested against my collarbone, cool to the touch. I walked out of the room. My mother was washing dishes in the kitchen. Mom, can I borrow this necklace for a few days? Mom turned her head to look back, her eyes reddening again. That was always meant for you. I clenched the pendant tightly. I remembered those words. In those memories, she never had the chance to say them. Back then, she lay on the hospital bed, unable to speak. This time, I won't let that day come. October 17th. The early admission exam. The test venue was at No. 1 Middle School, a 40-minute drive from my home. I got up at 6 and left the house at 6:30. As I went downstairs, I noticed a car parked at the entrance of the building. It wasn't anything fancy, an old Jetta with a few scratches on the body. The window rolled down, revealing the face of a middle-aged man. Gray-streaked hair, deep wrinkles. Robert. My father. Standing before me, still whole and intact. Get in, I'll give you a ride. I opened the door and sat inside. On the passenger seat was a bag of soy milk and 2 steamed buns. Still warm. Dad, I said, taking a bite of the bun, don't go to the construction site today. Robert started the car. Why? There's a surprise safety inspection at the East City site today, I said. Even if you go, you won't get in. It'll be a wasted trip. Robert's hand paused for a moment. How do you know? Heard it from someone. Not a lie. In those memories, the surprise inspection did happen. It's just that back then, no one told my father. He went, and on the way back. I closed my eyes, shaking the image out of my mind. Robert didn't press further, just let out an om-hom. As the car drove out of the neighborhood gate, I glanced at our window through the rearview mirror. Mom was standing by the window. She always liked standing there, watching us leave. I never knew that before. At the entrance of the exam hall, I saw Liam. He was wearing a white shirt, holding a cup of coffee, standing by the door. When he saw me, he walked over. Chloe, let's talk. Nothing to talk about. Did you hear something? His voice dropped. There's really nothing between Mia and me, she came to me. Liam, I cut him off. Whatever you have with her has nothing to do with me. Then why did you block me? I looked at his face. This face had once been so close to mine. So close that I could see the calculations in his eyes. Because you scare me. Liam paused for a moment. Scared of what? Scared that one day, you'll sign my name on the documents. His expression changed. The shift was quick, but he didn't deny it. He just tightened his grip on the coffee cup, his knuckles turning white. What are you talking about? You heard me. I turned and walked into the exam hall. Behind me, his voice dropped low, Chloe, you'll regret this. I didn't look back. The exam lasted 3 hours. I handed in my paper early, after checking it 3 times. As I walked out of the hall, I saw Noah crouching on the steps. He was holding a book. Criminal law. I walked over. He looked up. Article 266, he said, whoever defrauds public or private property, if the amount is especially huge, shall be sentenced to fixed-term imprisonment of not less than 10 years or life imprisonment. I stared at him for 5 seconds. Why are you telling me this? Noah stood up and closed the book. Who do you think I'm talking to? My fingers tightened around the straps of my backpack. I don't know what you're talking about. You know, Noah said, looking into my eyes, the amount involved in the East City plot case is enough for a life sentence. How do you know? Because of my dad, he said. He was the supplier of that batch of building materials that got swapped back then. On the school rooftop. Noah lit a cigarette but didn't smoke it, just held it between his fingers and let it burn on its own. I leaned against the railing, the wind blowing my hair across my face. My father worked in the building materials industry for 20 years. Noah's voice was flat. For the project on the east side of town, he supplied a batch of rebar. The national standard required HRB 400, but the construction site used HRB 335. He found out and demanded a replacement, but the site refused. And then? He refused to continue supplying and was preparing to report it to the Housing and Urban Rural Development Bureau. Noah stubbed out his cigarette on the railing. On his way there, he got into a car accident. A truck ran a red light and hit him from the side. My breath caught for a moment. He survived, Noah said, but his spine was damaged. He never stood up again. The wind suddenly picked up. You transferred to this school to investigate this? Noah didn't answer. He turned his head and looked at me. Chloe, the dreams you've had, I've had them too. My fingers tightened abruptly. What did you say? You dreamed of being betrayed, of something happening to your father, he didn't finish. How do you know? Because I've dreamed of you too. Noah extended his right hand. The old scar on the web between his thumb and index finger looked deep in the sunlight. The wind suddenly stopped. The entire rooftop fell silent, leaving only the sound of heartbeats. These aren't the first time I've had these dreams, Noah said, but the moment I first saw you, I knew, you were the person from my dreams. I looked at him. So you were checking up on me? I was waiting for you. My eyes suddenly burned. Waiting for me to do what? By the time you remember, he said, remember that you're not alone. Noah pulled a piece of paper out of his backpack. It was a hand-drawn floor plan. The floor plan of the Goose real estate building. I spent an entire summer figuring it out, he said. The security guard shift changes, the blind spots of the cameras, the fire escapes. But there's one place I can't get into. I looked at the drawing. The 17th floor, the CEO's office. Victor's office, I said. There's a separate access control at the door. Only his and Liam's keycards can open it. I know. If you have a card, can you get in? Noah looked at me. You have a card? I pulled a key card from the hidden pocket of my backpack. It was silver, with the Goose Real Estate logo printed on it. Liam asked me to help him organize the archives, I said. That time, I slipped the spare card into my backpack and forgot to return it. It's true. The spare card was hanging on the wall. I took it, and he never noticed. That was one of the few cards I kept up my sleeve for myself. I just didn't know back then where I would end up using it. Chloe, Noah said, do you know what this card means? Yes. Aren't you afraid? Scared. My hands were trembling. But once the fear passes, I still have to do it. Noah extended his hand. Allies. I took his hand. His hand was cold, the scar on his palm pressing against mine. My fingers suddenly tightened. Noah and I set a time. Next Friday, when the GU Corporation building's security system switched to weekend mode. But I never made it to that day. Tuesday night, I received a text message. The number was unfamiliar. Little girl, you have something you shouldn't. Put it back, and I can pretend this never happened. I didn't reply. 2 minutes later, a second text. Do you still want your father's job? My hands began to tremble. Not from fear. From anger. He knew about the letter I had. How did he know? I turned it over and over in my mind. The library. Someone saw. Or, Mia. That day's conversation, she heard it. I opened my phone and sent a message to Noah, they know. Move the plan up. The reply came quickly, when? Tomorrow. Wednesday night. Noah and I stood in the fire escape of the goo building. The lights in the stairwell were sound-activated, flickering on and off. The security system switches to weekend mode tomorrow, Noah lowered his voice. The surveillance is on tonight. I know. Then why did you still come? Because tomorrow it won't be here anymore. We started climbing the stairs. 17 floors, each step like treading on knife blades. The corridor lights flickered on one by one. Victor's office door was locked. I took out the silver access card. Beep. The door opened. The office was spacious, with a night view of the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I walked straight to the oil painting in the corner. The hidden compartment was behind it. Some of this information came from Liam's bragging, some from Noah's investigation. And some came from those memories. In those images, I had walked into this office. Many times. Noah tapped the wall behind the painting with his hand. Hollow. I dug my fingernails into the edge of the wooden panel and pried it open with force. The panel came off. It was empty inside. The safe was gone. My blood ran cold in an instant. He's already moved it, Noah said. We're one step too late. So what do we do now? My fingers tightened as I stood still. My mind raced. The safe was gone, but the documents wouldn't disappear. Victor wouldn't destroy them, they were his talisman. He would hide them somewhere else. Somewhere he trusted, somewhere only he knew. He has an old warehouse, I said. Liam mentioned it. Where? South of the city. I don't know the exact location. Noah was silent for a few seconds, then said a single word. I know who might know. Who? Mia. I didn't go straight to Mia. I knew that if I asked her, she would definitely tell Liam. So I waited. Waited for an opportunity. On Friday, the early admission exam results came out. Third in the city. The homeroom teacher posted a screenshot of the scores in the class group chat. Mia's private message arrived almost instantly. How did you do on the exam? I didn't reply. 3 minutes later, a second message. Did you get the answers in advance? I still didn't reply. A third one. Chloe, is there some misunderstanding between us? We're friends, aren't we? Friend. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Then I typed a line, Mia, I want to talk to you. After school, the usual place. The usual place. The milk tea shop behind the school. We had spent countless afternoons there. After school, Mia came. She sat across from me and ordered a taro bubble tea. I didn't order anything. Chloe, what's wrong with you? Her voice was choked with tears. Did you hear some gossip from someone? I looked at her. 14 years of friendship. She said, Chloe, you're my best friend. Best friend. That spiked milk tea. That tampered college application form. And by the swimming pool, she was sobbing heart-wrenchingly with her face buried in her hands. Mia, I said, do you know Victor? Mia's expression froze for a moment. Liam's dad? I've met him twice. Did he ever ask you to transfer something for him? What kind of thing? A safe. Mia's fingers suddenly tightened around the milk teacup. What are you talking about? Mia, I looked into her eyes, I won't tell anyone. But you need to tell me where the thing is. Mia stared at me for 5 seconds. Then she smiled. That smile sent a chill down my spine. Chloe, she set down her milk teacup, who do you think you are? Do you think just because you ranked third in the city, you can play the savior? Do you think Liam is chasing you because you're pretty? She stood up, her voice dropping very low. Let me tell you, Liam is chasing you because of your dad. Your dad has something his dad wants. My fingers gripped the edge of the table tightly. Your father signed the project on the east side of the city, but he backed out. Uncle Victor needs someone who will listen. So? My voice was flat. So stop pretending, Mia sneered. What, do you think you're some kind of good person? Your father signed, took the money, and now he wants to wash his hands of it? Dream on. I looked at her. 14 years of friendship. In that moment, shattered beyond repair. Mia, I said, I'm not pretending. The document my father signed was a blank confirmation page. Victor added content to it later. That's forgery. Is there a difference? Yes. I stood up. The difference is that forgery is a crime. Mia's expression shifted. Are you recording this? I didn't answer. You're insane, she stepped back. Chloe, you're insane. She turned and ran. The milk teacup toppled over on the table, taro pudding boba spilling everywhere. I sat there, reaching into my pocket, pressing the stop button. The recording wasn't long. But it was enough. Mia didn't tell me the location of the warehouse. But when she ran, Noah followed behind. That was something I had arranged in advance. At 7 in the evening, Noah sent me a location. South of the city, an abandoned industrial zone. I took a cab over. It was already dark, and more than half of the streetlights in the industrial zone were broken. Noah was crouching across from a warehouse, phone in hand. This is it, he said. She went in, hasn't come out in 20 minutes. Anyone inside? Lights coming through the windows. At least 2 people. I took out my phone and checked the time. Did you call the police? Yeah. Said someone was illegally storing hazardous materials. I glanced at him. You came up with that excuse? You think they'd believe there's criminal evidence hidden here? Noah said, hazardous materials, they respond fast. I had to admit, he was calmer than me. The warehouse door was locked. But the side window was loose. I climbed in. As I landed, my foot stepped on a piece of broken glass. The sound wasn't loud, but in the silent warehouse, it was especially jarring. Who? Liam's voice. I didn't move. The light came on. Liam stood in the middle of the warehouse, a safe behind him. Mia stood beside him, her face deathly pale. Chloe? Liam's expression shifted from wariness to a sneer. You actually found your way here. I stood up and brushed the dust off my clothes. The things in the safe, are they here? Take a guess. Liam walked over and stopped 3 steps away from me. Chloe, I didn't want things to come to this between us. Your dad's situation, we could have actually talked it out properly. About what? You get your dad to keep quiet, and I'll help you get a direct recommendation to Jingdai University. I looked at his face. In those fragmented memories, this face had once been so close to mine. Close enough that I could smell the cologne on his shirt. Liam, my voice was soft, but every word hit like a nail. Guess who your dad called first when he was stopped at the airport today? Liam's pupils suddenly contracted. I saw it. That moment of panic, like a crack in glass, spread from the depths of his eyes to the corners of his mouth. Did he call you? He didn't answer. His fingers, clutching the envelope, were trembling. You still called his lawyer? Chloe, his voice was hoarse. How did you know? How could you possibly know? I didn't answer. I just looked into his eyes, letting the silence drown him inch by inch. Do you know what else is in your dad's safe besides documents? I took a step forward. There's a recording. One of you and him discussing how to take out a loan in my name. Liam's face went completely pale. You're lying. You don't have to believe me. But the police already have it. It wasn't true. There was no recording in the safe. But if Liam believed it, he'd panic. And if he panicked, he'd do something stupid. Liam, she's bluffing. Mia shouted from the side. Liam looked at Mia, then at me. Then he smiled. Chloe, you think you've won? He turned and walked to the safe, entering the code. The door swung open. Inside, there was only a craft paper envelope. He took it out and, right in front of me, tore it in half. The original is gone, he said. What are you going to use to sue me? I stared at the 2 halves of paper on the floor. Then I smiled. Liam, do you know the difference between a copy and an original? Liam froze. You can't do handwriting analysis on a photocopy. But you can on the original. I crouched down and picked up the 2 halves of the paper. Thanks for tearing it for me, saved me the trouble. I slipped the pieces into my pocket. Sirens wailed outside. Liam's face went pale. You called the police? What do you think? Mia let out a shriek and grabbed Liam's arm. Liam shook her off and bolted for the back door. But he didn't make it. Noah stood in the doorway, gripping an iron pipe. Move. Liam shouted. Noah didn't budge. Your dad put my dad in a wheelchair, he said. We'll settle that debt another day. When the police burst in, Liam was slumped on the floor. Mia was crouched in the corner, crying into her hands. That crying sound, it was exactly the same as I remembered. But this time I didn't look back. A few months later. The first court hearing. I sat in the last row of the gallery, wearing my school uniform, my hair tied in a ponytail. Robert sat in the witness box. His hands were trembling, but his voice was steady. When I signed, that document was a blank confirmation page. I had no idea they later added the test report content. The prosecutor presented the print shop's back-end records. The small line of text, this document is the confirmation page of the test report. The signatory has read and confirmed that the above test results are true, was added 3 days after my father had signed. The print shop employee took the stand. I printed 3 versions of this document. The first was a blank confirmation page, the second included the test data, and the third added the underlined line of text. The person who placed the order was a Mr. Gu. In the gallery, Victor's face was ashen. Liam kept his head down, his expression unreadable. Mia was not there. As a witness, she had been scheduled for a different day. The trial lasted 3 days. On the final day, as Victor was being led out of the courtroom, he walked past me. He stopped. Little girl, he said, his voice low, you think you've won? Your father signed the papers, and your mother is still in the hospital. My fingers clenched. Victor, I said, I accompany my mother to every checkup every week. She's fine. And you don't need to threaten me, because every word you say will be recorded. I pointed to the recording equipment in the last row of the gallery. Victor's lips trembled. The police took him away. I sat in my chair, motionless. My hands were still shaking. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because this time I wasn't alone. On graduation day, the sun was shining brightly. I wore my cap and gown, stood on the stage, and received my diploma from the president. In the audience, my mom and dad sat in the front row. Dad's leg was perfectly fine. Over the years, he had never gone back to the east side of the city. Mom sat beside him, holding up her phone to record a video. Her thyroid nodules, under regular checkups, had not worsened. Next to her sat Emma, who had already passed the bar exam. And beside Emma was Noah. He wore a dark gray suit and held a bouquet of white chamomile flowers. I walked down from the stage, made my way through the crowd, and stopped in front of him. These are for you. He handed me the flowers. I took them and lowered my head to smell them. Why chamomile? Because its meaning is, Noah looked at me, strength in adversity. I smiled. Chloe. He called my name. I looked up. He took a small box out of his pocket. Black velvet, very small. Noah opened the box. It wasn't a ring. It was a necklace. Silver, with a star-shaped pendant. Exactly like my mother's. I searched for a long time, Noah said. Found it at a flea market. The vendor said it was a pair, a star and a moon. He took out the other one, its pendant shaped like the moon. The star and the moon, together forever. I reached out and picked up the star necklace. It was cool and heavy in my hand. I closed my eyes, holding the necklace in my palm. 3 years ago, on the morning I woke up, I saw my face in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my lips pale. But hidden in those eyes was a blade. Now, the blade is still there. But it has a sheath. I opened my eyes and looked at Noah. Put it on for me. He moved behind me, gently brushing my hair aside with his fingers, and fastened the necklace. The star rested against my collarbone, a chill seeping from my skin into my veins. Robert called out from below the stage, "Take a picture. Quick, take a picture." Emma held up her phone and said, "Smile." I turned my head toward the camera. I smiled. Click. The image froze. That night, I sat by the window. The star necklace around my neck glimmered faintly in the moonlight. I picked up my phone and sent a message to Noah. "Do you still have those dreams?" The reply came quickly. "Sometimes." But the ending changed. Changed to what? You were standing on the rooftop, the wind was strong. You said, "This time, it's my turn to choose." Then you turned your head, looked at me, and smiled. This time, I heard it. I stared at those words, my eyes reddening. Outside the window, the light in the building across was still on. Just like before. But what was different was that I now knew who that light was shining for. I held the necklace in my palm. I thought of that morning 3 years ago. I thought of the drugged milk tea. I thought of the altered recommendation form. I thought of my father's trembling hand on the witness stand. I thought of the things that had been stopped before they could even happen. I pressed the necklace against my chest. I spoke a single sentence into the night outside the window. My voice was so soft that only I could hear it. This time, it's my turn to choose.